Hi everyone, and thank you for joining my talk. Are we forever doomed by software supply chain risks? If you join this talk, then it means you care about software and you care about software security. Most of all, you are curious like I am. How does open source software supply chain security impacts all of us? You, me, and everyone else. Let's take a moment to reflect on this picture. When you look at this photograph, what comes to your mind? Is it a futuristic outlook of the world, perhaps the uprising of our robot overlords? For me, I ask myself, how much does the robot learn about my child and where is this information stored? Is it stored safely? I think about where does the robot get its software updates from, and can this upstream source be compromised? What can happen when it gets compromised, not just if? What's the probability that someone hacks in and you can watch the entire video feed and interact with my child? So these are some of the things that keep me up at night. Today, I would like to share with you real-world stories of how developers play a fundamental role in recent and growing security incidents, why you should care about software supply chain security, and leave you off to think about where do you put your trust. In case you had a doubt, we're seeing more and more open source software being developed year after year. Open source software repositories are growing with more software footprint. The applications we build, you and me, everyone else, we are ever growing in their dependency of open source software. More of us software engineers are accustomed to this habit, to the ways of open source software communication and contribution, and more of us are becoming maintainers of open source software. The growth of open source software doesn't come without any risks. We are continuously witnessing the growth of security vulnerabilities in open source software ecosystems like NPM and Java and others. These are everything from CVE-based official reports of security vulnerabilities that need to be addressed by those of us who are using and impacted those package versions in our applications, and others like incidents of malicious packages hitting the software supply chain and targeting us as developers who rely on open source software packages. This is my stories of open source. So let's rewind back in time and to get an early glimpse of how one developer perceived the risks of open source software. In 1984, Turing Award-winning Ken Thompson wrote a short essay titled Reflections on Trusting Trust, in which he describes how he added a backdoor to the Unix login program. And then he continued and added a backdoor to a C compiler. And then he further continued this chain of attack by backdooring the compiler that compiles the compiler. Now, in his revelation of how software can be taught to learn specific traits and pass them on to their spawns, other programs that they create, he explains how software can remain without a trace of a Trojan horse because of the dangers of trusting code that we did not entirely create ourselves. Anything from the application source code all the way out to the compiler, the assembler, the CPU unit, the hardware, everything else. If you cannot trust it, what do you do at this point? As we learned by Thompson's Trojan horse story dating back from 1984, developers have been targeted as a vehicle to distribute malware and backdoors for a very long time now. Let's explore some of those more recent events. In 2018, the JavaScript ecosystem witnessed its first high-impact spearheaded surgical attack, targeting maintainers and developers working in open source, and themselves being used as an attack vehicle to distribute malicious JavaScript code designed to decrypt itself and run in a specific environment, targeting developers of Bitcoin wallet applications. This was the well-known event stream incident. Event stream existed on the NPM registry since 2011, very long time. Practically did not receive any new releases in the last 2 years, which we'll see in a second why this is so important. But it gained millions of downloads per week, out of the blue, a person shows up on the GitHub repository, opening an issue and wanting to help, as is customary in open source. They further contribute code with several pull requests. And then they also create a pull request that adds one of the pieces of code into a new dependency, a new module that gets added to EventStream's own package dependency tree with supposedly genuine intent to improve the code base for EventStream and use this in a modular way in the NPM ecosystem. Yet, a few weeks later, they add a code payload inside that dependency that they own and they created and they added now into EventStream. That extra piece of code that they added in a new version now injects malware into a specific Bitcoin wallet application called Copay. The Copay wallet application used EventStream as part of its build process and is now tainted by this malware. This incident had gone unnoticed for almost 3 months, resulting with 2 versions released of the Copay Bitcoin application that included the malware. Now, why was this important that EventStream itself did not have any release in the last 2 years? An academic research paper published in 2019 investigated the properties of language-based software ecosystems. It compared the NPM ecosystem with the PyPI, the Python ecosystem. And it found that 61% of open source packages on NPM could be considered abandoned because they did not receive any release in the prior 12 months. The EventStream package would have been classified as an abandoned package in